former public school principal. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining me. And Zakia, I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, is the reopening happening in a way that is both safe and effective for kids? And if not, what should the system be doing differently?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think there's a lot to be done and a lot that has to be done. It is not safe to reopen fully, but I'm actually torn too, because I speak to parents often that say that I have to go to work and I need to send my child to school. And so what we need to do is make sure that we are addressing those things, those issues, and those parents that need this. They are essential workers, but they are also concerned about their kids, and their kids need to go to school as well. So for an example, my grandson, was his first day back in school. He was so happy when he got home. He said it was the best day ever. And after not being in school for days and doing remote learning, he's doing the blended learning, and he has an IEP. But my other granddaughter is able to stay home because my daughter is able to do that, and she's concerned, right? And so these issues parents are experiencing, and it's hard to do any of that if we don't have funding to ensure that we have cleaning supplies and we have masks, and teachers are getting trainings and all those things. So the funding matters. It really does. $1 billion cut to education can only impact us in a negative way in the midst of a pandemic.
Okay, David Banks, your Eagle Academy schools are in all corners of the city. What has your experience been with reopening, and how's it going?
First of all, I would say, Earl, it has been a major challenge, not just for Eagle, but the fact of trying to return all of these 1.2 million students back into the school system was not an easy endeavor. The mayor locked in and drew a line in the sand. He was committed to doing it. But it was there were no easy choices in how to deal with this situation. Our young people started to return today in very small numbers, which I think portends some deeper issues that we're going to have. Lots of our kids are still at home learning virtually, and I don't think the system has done nearly enough to prepare our teachers, to prepare them to be ready to teach the virtual experience in a proper way.
Were there examples outside of New York that I know you're in touch with folks all over the world who are doing different kind of educational experiments and innovations? Was there some jurisdiction where you sort of said, oh, we need to do it like, you know, Minneapolis or Miami or some other place?
Absolutely not. That's part of the challenge. Everybody is struggling with this issue. I think where other cities really got it right was when they made a decision, like Chicago and Los Angeles, to say they made a decision early on. We're not going to return in person until there's a vaccine. And in the meantime, we're going to spend all of our time, effort, energy, and resources on preparing our teachers to teach virtually in a really deep way. Right now, we're not doing it well because we haven't prepared our teachers enough. And think about this, Earl. This represents a great opportunity to teach virtually. Students should no longer have to be limited by the teacher that they have in their classroom. If you use technology the right way, we can have people and teachers from other cities even teaching our students right here in our classes at the click of a button. But that takes leadership, that takes vision. We haven't implemented enough time, effort, or energy to make those kinds of things happen.
Neither of you are shrinking violets. Zakia, I've heard you advocate in front of large groups, small groups, always very passionately. What went on in the Education Advisory Council? Were they listening to the things that you all were saying that you're telling me here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating. I went in there with my expectation of being wide open, not necessarily believing or thinking that something was actually going to be totally, everything that we talked about was going to be done. But in this moment of a pandemic, it's an all hands on deck approach. Yes, I was frustrated by it. What did people did we share and people hear us? Yes. Did they listen? That's another conversation. I think to add on to David's point, which is we did an envisioning session a few months in July, where we did 10 of them across the state. And that was with parents, it was with students, it was with educators, again, statewide. And some of the things that David pointed out, which is to ensure that educators at all levels had training to teach remotely as well as to address trauma. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we're experiencing now. One of the things was like, we needed to make sure that social emotional learning was the first thing that every child is receiving before they learn in their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, because there has been so much trauma. And personally, I can say my grandson, I know for a fact, gets it because he sits here in his space when he's learning, and I hear the teacher talk about it. So it's really, I'm glad to hear that. But then we also have this moment where we're talking to parents and they're saying their children are sitting in remote classes of 59 kids. That's unacceptable, right? And so how are we making sure that we are following the advice, the thoughts, and the things that parents across the city are saying they need? And I don't think there was enough of that happening, and there's not enough of that happening.
Absolutely.
If you could roll back the clock, David. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would just say I completely agree with that. I was a New York City school leader for 13 years, and I was appalled at the fact that the voices of school leaders, school superintendents, was not really part of this process. And I think I was even more appalled at the fact that our parents, their voices were not heard. Every time I see the mayor make announcements about the changes that are happening in the system, he's there with the heads of the various unions, and they're representing their constituencies. I've never seen him on the stage with parents, and particularly parents of color, who represent the majority of the students in this system. I want to see that they're co-signing what is going on here. Their voices have not been represented, and I think that that's a shame.
What are your parents telling you about the uncertainty, the delays, the changes in the schedule, and the system that we've arrived at going forward?
Great frustration. That's what I've heard from the very beginning, and greater frustration with the constant changes, which suggest to people that the leadership is just lacking. It's every other week there's something new that's coming up. Everybody recognizes that this is a major challenge. That's a given. But in times like this, people expect strong leadership, and they recognize that it's not going to be easy, but we have to hunker down. We got to the point where people expecting another decision next week. I would not be surprised if a week or two from now, our schools, they make another decision to eventually close the schools because the numbers are going to spike. And we're starting to see that already. These are things that are pretty obvious, and we should have expected, but I don't know that we've been properly preparing for these things.
Yeah. Zakia, what does your intuition and your knowledge of the situation tell you about this? How likely is it that we're going to see major changes and possibly a full shutdown in the future?
I mean, I believe that we probably will, just on the basis of what we're hearing nationally, which is flu season, cold season is about to happen, right? And that's going to impact us for sure. The other thing is that I think, what we're hearing again from parents and others is that this level of hopelessness, like, I can't teach my child. I don't know how to do this, and I'm depressed. Parents are crying. We got grandmothers who have stopped working, who have been able to stop working across the state to be able to take care of the child. But this level of hopelessness, we have to figure out how we address that. And right now, a lot of what's happening remotely, there's parents that still don't have laptops. There's students that don't, not every child has one. There's a lot of things that we need to address. And at the end of the day, I want to say it again, we can't do it. We can't clean schools. We can't buy masks. We can't make sure that every child has a laptop and computers if we are not funding schools. And where we're at now, we cut $1 billion in the state, and the governor is waiting for the federal government to save us. That is impossible. We have a white supremacist in the White House. How does he expect him to save black and brown kids? That ain't gonna happen. So we need a governor and the New York State legislature to actually take action and tax the ultra wealthy right now. Because guess what? It's time to protect children and start protecting billionaires.
Okay, that is going to be the last word for now. Zakia Ansari, David Banks, thank you so much for joining me tonight. We are going to take a short break here. Coming up next, the Human Rights Watch released a report.